Welcome back to Podcasting for Financial Professionals. I'm your host, Virginia Elder, and today we're talking about one of my favorite topics, niching down your podcast to attract exactly the right audience and grow your business. This isn't a niching conversation by marketers, though. Today, you're hearing from a financial advisor who launched his podcast in February of 2025 and who has been actively grinding through the learning curve of creating, promoting, and growing his show this year. With my help, of course, but still, he is the mastermind considering it's his brand and messaging and credibility we're building. My guest is Jack Wang, host of the Smart College Buyer podcast. Jack helps parents figure out how to pay for college without taking on a truckload of debt. His phrasing, I love it. He's immersed himself in the world of college admissions, joining boards, going on campus tours, and building his authority as the go-to advisor for families trying to make smart college funding decisions. In our conversation, Jack shares about how niching has opened the door to a steady stream of podcast guests. He's got more than enough people lined up wanting to be on his show, how he repurposes and promotes his episodes, some cool tips there, and how his show works as part of his business funnel, filtering out quick answer seekers and helping serious prospects get educated before they ever book a call with him. Jack and I talk about meeting at a conference, so there's no better time to remind you to download the free conference toolkit linked in the show notes. It's a simple framework that helps you turn your content into relationship nurturing touch points after you meet someone at an event. You're going to hear Jack talk about how he uses this strategy with shorts, sending clips that directly answer people's questions, which positions him as helpful and keeps the conversation going. The toolkit shows you how to do the same thing with your own content. Grab it now so you're ready for your next conference connection. Jack, thanks so much for being here with me today.
Thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate it, Virginia.
This is going to be great. I am so excited to learn a little bit more about you than what I already know just from working together. Something that I'm curious about and that I think will be really useful to someone listening is you and I met a couple years ago and you were hemming and hawing thinking about launching a podcast and you just didn't pull the trigger for a while. I'm not sure, what was going on in the background there, but I would love to hear your story about what was your thought process and what made you want to launch a podcast and what made you finally do it. What was like a year later when we met again
right.
at FinCon.
Right. For those of you, listening, I met Virginia at FinCon Orlando, I believe, which I believe was 22. You were volunteering in the podcast booth. I still remember this because I was recording with my friend Lorraine. She had me, myself, and Adam Minsky. Prior to COVID, the way I built my business was through doing just workshops, speaking anywhere and everywhere. So libraries, community groups, and then fell into the this financial wellness space. So companies were hiring me or through their benefits brokers or their 401k providers to bring me in to talk to their employees about student loans, managing credit, all different topics. And I was really enjoying doing it, but, I wasn't recording those sessions. So my reach was only to the people in the room, right? Now, I was speaking 40 to 45 times a year. I was doing this almost once a week. Wow. I was exhausted, but it was great. It's how I built my practice. But the reach only went so far. So then, of course, COVID happens. Nobody's going anywhere. And quite frankly, I thought I was out of a job, right? Like people are losing their jobs left and right. Nobody's going to college because everything's shut down. I literally thought that I was going to have to go work at the supermarket, become an essential worker that way because that's all I had.
Yeah, do what you got to
do. Do what you got to do. So during COVID, people start doing webinars and things like that. So really started thinking about that as well. Now, let me just back up a little bit. What made me think about webinars and stuff is prior to COVID, I also was producing a local access TV show about personal finance. So I was actually in the studio doing a 30-minute show, bringing guests, having to write my own intros, outros, understand the lighting, the set design, whole 9 yards. And so, of course, during COVID, that came to an end, but I learned a lot there. So it kind of got the bug in me. So during COVID, I'm like, okay, well, let's do webinars. But coming out of COVID, I really like the idea of recorded content or content that could stay out there, because now it was a resource I could use. You did not have to catch me live in person to hear from me, right? You could go view this video or listen to this audio, whatever. Like, I really want to do something, but you're right. I hemmed and hawed for a long time. I was doing a lot of guesting on other people's podcasts, which looking back, I think really helped me because I got to see different styles and different setups and understand how to be a host. Even though I was a host of the TV show, like I did some of that, but in the podcast environment, I had never done that. So it allowed me to understand that aspect a little bit better and just some of the preparation that's involved. Being as part of the community access TV station, I had access to a full-blown podcast studio. So there was a soundboard, boom mics, sound installation on the wall, right? There were cameras in the room that were high angle. Like, hey, this is great. I'm going to do this. It was an aborted attempt because I started to understand how difficult it was to juggle 3 schedules. My own schedule, the schedule that of the guest, and the studio schedule. Like, it just got way too complicated, and even with some of the tools out there, like your Calendly type of stuff, it was hard to set up 3 different schedules. So that ended up sort of getting that on the back burner. Now, I think I met you at FinCon. We talked a bunch. And then finally, outside of FinCon, I'm part of another podcasters group. And you and I had already started to, I think, lay the groundwork. And I show up to this podcasters group with all these highly experienced podcasters and just all different topics, had nothing to do with finance. And I was the only person there who didn't actually have a podcast, right? And I'm talking about this and this, and I had some of the equipment and everything else. Like, yeah, I'm the only guy who's not actually recording. But I had guested a lot. So I've made some really great connections there and learned a lot from those folks. I'm still a part of that group. That group is actually affiliated with PodFest. So it just took me a long time. But I think also the biggest change for me, sort of the biggest aha of what led me to do it, was just thinking about how I want to build my business. That came from seeing the giants in the financial industry. So people like Michael Kitces, people like Ed Slott, also a financial advisor who is a huge inspiration to me, who I know is Brenton Harrison. I saw him at FinCon 23 Orlando, and he has a podcast who markets. Like, that's his primary marketing platform. So I started to learn all this. And if you think about the Michael Kitces and the Ed Slotts of the world, when you want to work with them, you don't call up Michael Kitces, you don't call up Ed Slott, you work with their team, right? But Kitces and Ed and others, they're the people out front generating people for the top of the funnel. And so I started to think, well, yeah, that's what I want to do, right? So I'm kind of refashioning my entire business to go with that model and just all of these things that, yeah, it took me a long time to get there, but all of these things have really added to my journey, my learning, to help me understand it and build it the way I want so I can get there.
By the way, of course, no shade as far as like how long it took you or I'm not putting you down in any way. That is so normal. There's so many people out there that think, I want to have a podcast. This would be perfect. Oh, look at so-and-so. They're doing this and this is how they do their business. And like, I want to do that. And not only do the stars have to align, But we have to get to a point where we fully feel ready, or we won't stick with it. We won't have the correct foundation laid, like you mentioned. And sometimes it just takes that journey to where we finally say, okay, I'm ready to do it. We are launching. I'm not sitting on this any longer. I've fully formed my ideas. I know what I would say. I have thought about how I want to introduce myself. I've thought about the angle of my show versus my business. So I kind of want to praise you for normalizing that long thought process.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you.
Going through that journey. Because I know it can be painful too. You're thinking, like, you almost feel behind sometimes when you haven't launched. And I just, again, want to say how normal that is. But you did it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And you're right. I mean, and with your help and just also everything I've learned, you want to think through the details about like, what's the angle I want to take? What's the show even going to be about? Now, having said all that, I will share this to anybody think about doing it. You should just start, right? And sometimes without some of this stuff figured out, just to get a comfort level and stuff. And I think sometimes, there's the two extremes. Sometimes there's too many ideas and you focus on too many of these details, it becomes overwhelming. And then other times, I know in the past, there have been times like, well, what would I talk about? I don't know what I want to talk about, right? But I realized that there's so many topics I can cover and not have to repeat myself, and so many different people I want to talk to. And now I'm at a comfort level where, hey, if it's not quite right, that's okay. It's okay. So, because a lot of times people talk about, for example, the different recording platforms. I know we're using Riverside, but there's other platforms. I use the script. But I know sometimes people just use Zoom, and I know a lot of like professional podcasters are not fans of Zoom because of the audio quality. But at the same time, if you're comfortable with Zoom and it just allows you to start, then just do it, right? It's okay. It's okay if it's a little choppy in the beginning. That's at least my advice to people. You might, I think, tell some, other people something a little bit different, because actually during COVID, I did a short 5-minute video series with a colleague, with a friend, and we did it on Zoom, and I did some super light editing, threw on like an intro and outro slide really, and that was it, right? But every episode was about 5 minutes, and we would just talk back and forth about something related to college. And was it the best looking thing ever? Of course not, but we both enjoyed doing it. We got a lot out of it, and prospects for her as well as prospects for me would say that they saw the videos. I'm like, okay, it worked. It did what we needed to do. And we had some good times with it. And again, it was just over Zoom, which is a platform that most podcasters I don't think use. But you know what? If you're comfortable with it, just do it. It's okay.
Yeah. So I'm hearing a few things there is, of course, the opportunity to just start with tools that are at your disposal, that you're comfortable with, and the opportunity to upgrade as you go. Jack, I'm sure you can attest to this, that I will emphasize that we want you to be recording on a platform that's made for high quality audio and video. So I will push people toward upgrading sooner rather than later. But start, right? Like that's all we need to do is just get started. But the other thing I'm hearing as part of your journey is that you guested on other people's podcasts. You got the opportunity to play around with this local TV studio, and you had a podcast studio accessible to you there where you got to record some stuff. You started dabbling with editing these little short videos between you and a friend and posting them somewhere, right? So you're dabbling in what could grow into the podcasting space. And whether that was an intentional mapped out journey or not, because I don't think it was.
It was not.
You were edging toward the goal the whole time, even if you didn't realize it.
But I will say this, what I did understand, even from the beginning, was the idea of reusable content. So even years ago, if someone would reach out to me, or let's say a prospect reach out to me and they say, hey, we'd love to meet, I have a question about this. And if I knew that I had a video, a clip, or an article or something that was about that topic, I would send that to them, right? So I never, I think if you started business pre-COVID, and especially, a lot of firms will have the glossy brochures and the packet of materials, right? I never had any of that. I never wanted any of that. But my recorded video clips or articles or whatever, that was my marketing collateral. So I understood that. It was not really mapped out. It wasn't necessarily intentional, but I did understand that, hey, I could reuse this, send it out, and just, hey, if this answers your question, great. If you still have more questions, then we can meet. Like, I did get that from the beginning.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier something about, answering the same question over and over again. And now I think you've been able to use podcasting in combination with some of the shorts that you make to help create almost like a little library, like you're saying, where someone comes with a question and you're directing them toward either the podcast or a short. So in a sense, you've created a funnel now using your podcast. Would you talk about how you're not having to have meetings where you're repeating yourself anymore, and a little bit about how this funnel works or how it's been inadvertently formed?
Yeah. So this really stemmed from the session with Brenton. His whole thing was about saving time so you can spend it more with family. And I really resonate with that. He can tell the story better, but basically he uses podcasts both as a prospecting, but also as a filtering mechanism, right? To find people who are truly good fits for that. And I really, really like that because I was really getting burnt out. I mean, I love what I do, don't get me wrong, but I was getting burnt out because every initial meeting was the same 10 questions over and over again. How does this work? How does that work, right? And I would imagine that most financial advisors listening out there to this, if you're doing an introductory meeting with a prospect on retirement plan, you probably get the same 10 questions over and over again. So I liked what Brenton had set up, which is using this podcast to answer those basic questions so that prospects could arrive to that first meeting, ideally better informed, right? You can't force people to listen to it, but ideally they would listen and they would arrive better informed. So you don't have to spend time on those 10 questions over and over. In fact, I actually thought about it so much that I thought about putting the initial podcast into like a learning management platform and then generating like a quiz out of it. Like before you meet with me, you have to listen to the podcast, pass the quiz, and then you get to meet with me. But I figured that might be a little bit much. But what I will do today, and it's really worked out well, is if someone wants to meet with me, a prospect, happy to meet with them, always happy to talk to people, but I push everybody to the podcast. I'll say, listen, especially the first 3 episodes, you're probably going to get 90% of your questions answered, right? The same 10 questions over and over again, right? If you listen to those and you get your questions answered, if you still want to meet, we can meet, right? If you don't feel like you need to meet anymore, then that's okay, And I know that also now a lot of advisors would freak out and say like, wow, that's a prospect you didn't get to meet with, right? You could have done some business. But the reality, and Brendan talks about this, is that they probably weren't right for you anyway, or they were a do-it-yourselfer, they weren't going to hire you, or they weren't ready, sort of ready to hire you from a time standpoint. Yeah, theoretically, might you missed out on some business? Probably, but the reality is you're probably not missing out as much as you think you might be. So that was a big, very, very enlightening thing for me. So I've fully dove into that, and now I do that, and it's been great. So, but again, back to sort of that kits us as slot model, right? Put out a lot of content, be the the guy out front to generate prospects, but also use the podcast to filter out. And then the right prospects come through, and then we get to work together and everybody's happier.
Yeah. And I don't think it's so much as you push them towards your podcast and then now you don't have to book an appointment. I'm thinking they go listen to the podcast and they feel like they know you even better. They know the questions that you answered on the show. And so then now the questions that they bring to you are truly those like personal, this is my individual situation. I need help with this. Yes, I've heard all of this advice. Tell me what my options are. And then that's that like more exciting meeting that we'd like to have with our potential clients because they're truly coming educated, cards on the table and ready to seek a solution, not just high level questions.
Exactly. And I know you and I have talked about this before, just about how your personality comes through. Like I like to joke around and have fun. And so I do that. As part of this sort of podcasting journey, I remember years ago, I went to a speed networking event and I was one of 8 financial advisors in the room. And the joke, even to this day, is you can always tell who the attorneys are and the financial advisors are because in an in-person networking event, they're the only people in suits,
Yes.
right? They're the only people in suits. No offense to any of the listeners, but most financial advisors walk and talk alike, right? They all look alike. They all talk the same thing. Like there's nothing differentiating. And I think that like really imprinted on me, right? To allow myself to differentiate from other advisors. But also part of this journey, and this, I hadn't thought about this in such a long time, but there was a men's clothing store here in Massachusetts called Sims. Their tagline for years was something like an educated consumer is their best customer. I remember hearing that over and over again as like an ad on the radio when I was a kid. And I think my very first suit that my parents bought me was from Sims. And it was super, like they had like the in-store tailors and just super, it wasn't like a high-end store, but like, people who wanted quality, like you went there and that was their tagline. And so I didn't think about it for a long time. And as I'm going through this, I'm like, it dawned on me one day. I'm like, oh yeah, I used to hear that thing over and over again. Educates consumers their best customer. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do here.
Yeah. So along those lines, I mean, at the top, I already introduced you as the financial advisor who focuses on college admissions and helps families figure out this whole college process because there is a lot of financial planning involved there. So expand on why you took that angle as far as differentiation, which I'm sure that's a little bit of what it was. But I think that niche story is so important because that's the piece that's going to make you be more than a suit, right? In a networking meeting. That's the differentiation that even in the podcast space that consumers are listening for. Like, why does this person identify with me or why do I identify with them? What specific thing can I go to them for? And sure, help me get my kids into college, Jack. And by the way, we've also done all this other financial planning that helps me with retirement and everything else. But we started over here with college admissions. I think that's such a neat angle.
Yeah.
Will you tell us some more about that?
Yeah. So the backstory, the short backstory is that I started to lean into this niche as a result of my own divorce. My kids were in middle school at the time. Prior to that, I was your average financial advisor, no different than anybody else, right? Wearing the suit to networking events.
Navy blue, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. But I will say the only thing I did keep from those days, a lot of my ties were like cartoon ties or like kid ties or like, so I still have a lot of those. Anyway, so I was going through a divorce. My kid's mother was actually her second divorce. And I had a stepdaughter at the time, and in her first divorce, they did not really have a provision for a college. So This time around, her second divorce, my first, she said, like, we got to put in something for college. Coincidentally, I was playing in a men's baseball league, and one of my teammates was at the time a financial aid administrator for a very well-known, internationally known college here in the Boston area. I won't say who. And he was very generous with his time. So I'm going through the process, trying to figure out how it works. And he was sharing with me about how financial aid works and policies and everything else. And I just remember thinking, well, if I need to know, then I'm sure other people need to know, even if they're not getting divorced. So that's really how it all started with for me. Now, he and I are still friends. He's now a consultant for colleges around the country, and he still plays baseball. I don't anymore. But that's really where it started. And so the more I lean into it, honestly, from a business perspective, the better it got. I mean, yeah, there were things I had to figure out, but I compare it to the medical profession, where the typical financial advisor is the primary care, right? You sort of have to know a little bit about everything and sort of quarterback, if you will, that patient relationship. But those doctors understand that when the patient needs a specialist for whatever, you refer out to a specialist. And so I'm the specialist. It makes it really easy to get clients, to get prospects, because I'm the college guy. And I found it to be great working with family finances, because in the college world for financial aid, families have to disclose everything, right? Because I know from industry news and stuff, there's advisors out there who manage one piece of a client's finances, but another piece is with another advisor, or just they're doing it themselves or whatever. In the financial aid world, you have to tell me everything. So it gives me a view into everything. Right. And then from there, well, how are you going to pay for college? How's this going to impact your retirement? How's this going to impact your plans for your vacation next year? Right. All those things come in, allows me to do it. So it's a great niche to be in. And it really helps me stand out because I lean really heavily into the niche. Now, can I talk about retirement planning? Yeah. Can I talk about investments? Yeah, but I don't. And in fact, I refer those out to friends, colleagues, so they can be the specialist for retirement, the specialist for investment, the specialist for insurance, whatever, right? Maintaining that sort of that medical model, if you will, where we bring in specialists. And I love doing it because I tell clients, you want to talk to specialists because it's your money. It's important to you. You don't want someone who sort of knows. You want someone who actually knows.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, I think you've done a really good job of differentiating yourself in that space. Like, I don't know of any other financial advisors that focus on college admissions and financial planning through the lens of how are we going to afford college. So I think that's really unique and special. And plus, you've taken it to the next level because you literally go on college tours all the time, all over the country. You spend time talking to the admissions personnel at these colleges, the financial aid personnel at these colleges. So you've leaned into it. It's not just this, I don't know, like facade, like just niche by name saying this is what I do, but I'm really just trying to like pull you in and sell you this life insurance. Like, that's not what's happening.
Right. No, I mean, I speak regularly on college financial aid. I'm a member of a couple associations, not financial advisors association, but financial aid, like college financial aid people associations. I'm still guesting on podcasts, but I'm also a speaker to organizations. So for example, like Financial Planning Association New England had me speak to their membership about college planning, what advisors, planners can do. You're right. I mean, I lean into it because what I found, even, I used to be this guy, right? The way to pay for college was put every last penny you had into a 529 plan and just hope for the best. And so the typical advisor is like, hey, start the day your kid's born and I'll see you in 18 years and we'll see what happens. And I'm like, well, that's not really a plan, That was the basic gist of what I saw from a lot of people. there's people out there, for example, who say that they're Social Security experts, right? And they may very well be. I'm not. But imagine if that Social Security expert, let's say the Social Security Administration themselves had a meeting on changes in the formula to calculate benefits, right? Would that advisor go to that meeting? And the answer to that question, 99% of the time, would be no. But when colleges have a meeting, when the colleges, financial aid administrators have their annual meeting to talk about changes, I go, right? And I know a ton of those people. And so they're friends. And so I go because I want to hear directly from them and ask questions. And so, yeah, the weird, not consequence, but the weird sort of side effect of this is that my entire closet, or almost my entire closet, is college merch because I go on these college tours and they know I'm coming. I tell them who I am and stuff. So I have t-shirts, hoodies, sweatshirts, sweatpants, hats, bags, everything. I mean, honestly, if I want to just wear college logo merch, I don't need to buy clothes for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of a fun side effect, like you said. But so I want to highlight for those listening and you're thinking, okay, cool, I need a niche, like the way that Jack has niched himself. Your Social Security example is actually really great. Like, find the thing that is interesting to you, that you would go to those meetings, that you would join those associations. And that is how you separate yourself from the pack. You start talking about that specific thing, let's say Social Security benefits. Maybe you become the Social Security benefit person and you know all there is about that. That is how you niche yourself. And that's also how you're able to have a show as a financial advisor, is through speaking about those niche topics, not necessarily speaking about how to invest, what to invest in, all the things that we're not allowed to podcast about as financial advisors. So if you want to just speak about compliance just a little bit, Jack, because I think that's the other big hesitance. And maybe, did you have any hesitances about compliance before we started talking, you and I?
I had a little bit of hesitancy about compliance, but having done this a long time, and even prior to podcasting, I was doing workshops and stuff. So I was doing a lot of public speaking. So I was pretty comfortable with where the line is drawn, right? Like education versus advice. And even today, I would get asked questions like, "Hey, what do you think about 529 plan?" Or someone, in a public forum like that might ask me, "Should I invest in a 529 plan?" I know enough to how to answer, like, "Well, I can't tell you that, but here are the things you may want to consider in order to make that decision for yourself," right? By the way, just for compliance fun, just so listeners, stay tuned till the end of the episode when I spout out winning lottery numbers and the get rich quick schemes that you can use with your clients, right? We'll see if any compliance people pick up on that. But, it was always in the back of my mind. I knew sort of where that line was drawn. I try to stay really far away from it. I think that the whole point of niching, right? Like, I know I'm not the only college advisor guy. There are other people, and I actually know many of them, and I respect them, and we talk and we share ideas and thoughts and whatever. So if someone were to become the Social Security expert, you wouldn't necessarily be the only one, but I'll ask this, right? Like, of advisors listening, how many advisors have actually read the actual regulations that govern Social Security? I bet you it'd be zero, right? How many have read the actual regulations that govern Medicare? Probably zero, right? Because I know advisors in the industry, we have other people and then they send us like the summary of, or we use software to figure some of the stuff out. But I have read the actual financial aid regs. And as we're recording this, this is a little bit after the passage of the Big Beautiful Bill, and I downloaded all 870 pages of that legislation, and I read the part about 100 pages that dealt with financial aid and student loans. need a drink after that, but I did read it.
During it.
Yeah. So I think niching down, but from a compliance standpoint, I think it's working with your compliance officer. I know, especially in broker-dealer environments, they might be really hesitant to allow you to do something like this. In the RIA world, probably a little bit easier. It's still worth the ask. It's still worth pursuing because it can be such a great platform to showcase your personality, get your message out there. Perhaps your own unique spin on Social Security or your own unique spin on retirement planning or whatever the case may be, right? That you may want to niche down into. I think it may take some time to kind of win over some of those compliance folks, but it can be done because I know people have done it. Brendan himself, his platform, his podcast, he's in the broker dealer world, right? He's not RIA. So it can be done. I think what you have to watch out for is sometimes the compliance people will want to script it out ahead of time. And I think that takes a lot away from this format because much like we're talking here, very conversational. We might go in slightly different directions. And if you have to script it, it limits the guest because you might want to expand on something. And I can tell you as a host, it ties my hand because I might want the guest to expand on something, right? Again, for education, not for advice. But hey, I might say, hey, Virginia, tell our audience a little bit more about that one thing that you just mentioned. And I don't want you to say, well, I can't because it's not in the script. So funny story, I will just share this with you. This was not a script, but just so back when I was recording the personal finance show, I would prep my guests and I would give them some questions in advance. And I knew enough about their business so I can ask questions. I would tell them, I'm not going to ask you anything that I know you can't answer, right? Like the purpose here is I'm trying to make you look good. Okay. So I'm not, no gotcha stuff. So I interviewed this one friend, this woman, she had never done anything like this before. So she sits in the chair again. She had the questions in advance. She was so nervous. And this is kind of like reading from a script. I would ask her a question and she would answer like, yes, Jack, the answer to your question. And so the way the studio was set up, our chairs were angled. Behind her was a monitor so I can see the camera shot. I had to turn away because I was about to burst out laughing, right? Because it looked so ridiculous.
Because she was so like straight faced, like
right.
nervous.
Like, oh my God. Like right. And you can see during that episode, after a while, she relaxed and her body posture relaxed and stuff. And she was better about it. But in the beginning, and so my point with that is if you do a script, it takes away from the natural flow. Like you would answer like this woman did. Yes, Virginia. The answer my compliance department told me I can say is like that would just be ridiculous. But advisors, it's worth the ask. It is absolutely worth the ask, especially if you're part of a bigger like BD network. I'm sure somebody is doing it already, so you probably can do it. But you just haven't asked them.
There's a couple things to highlight there. Is for one, oftentimes it is a little bit of a back and forth conversation. Like, how can we make this possible? What can I do? Just kind of like change the language of what you're asking the compliance department. And then almost like education for them as well to say, okay, well, in this format, these things aren't necessarily scripted up front. Here are some things and some topics that I think we're going to talk about. After recording, before publish, I am happy to give you the full transcript, give you the edited audio and video, the show notes, like everything that would be published with this episode, and you get a chance to review and approve it before it publishes. So like talking through that process and asking, how can we make this possible? What would you like to see? How can we give this to you? What would the timeline be that you would prefer? Like you could just be like the nicest, most coordinative person ever. And eventually I feel like you would make some headway even with the most difficult compliance office. And I say that as a manager who's worked with many different compliance offices. We've put many episodes in different formats through and gotten approvals. But then I think the second piece of that is Like you said, Jack, knowing how to toe that line. And if you're speaking about your niche topic, that really helps you focus on those specific things and not just, typical advisory talk that would be confidential with your clients.
Yeah, it's definitely an education process for compliance, especially if you are going to talk about a niche that they might not be as familiar with. So, for example, for mine, and they have to have a comfort level with you, right? So, like if you're a brand new advisor to the firm, walking in day one saying, "Hey, I want to do a podcast," they're going to say no because not only they're probably not familiar with podcasts for their advisors, but they're not familiar with you. Right. But if you've been at a firm for a while and you're, relatively big producer, they probably understand that you're not going to do something to mess up your own practice. And so there's a little bit more credibility there. And if you educate them, like you said, like, hey, let's record, you'll get the full transcript afterwards, but before publication. After a while, some of the people I know who are in the BD world who do podcasts, it's been a process, but now their compliance people are comfortable with the advisor and have trust in the advisor, knowing that the advisor is not going to cross that line. And again, some of it's education, and as the advisor also, it's understanding the difference, right? The line. And so in the financial aid world, people ask me things like, should I fill out the financial aid form, the FAFSA, right? So should is the advice question, right? So should you do it? I don't know. But I have to tell people this is separate from compliance, but I'm like, but if you're going to do it, the form opens on this date and they're going to ask these type of questions, right? That is a factual answer that no compliance officer would ever have or shouldn't have a issue with. But as the advisor, you have to understand, like, you can't really answer the should question, but you can still answer in a way that gives good information and that makes for a good podcast, right? And it also educates your compliance person be comfortable with you knowing that you're not going to answer the should question.
So that made me think about, okay, compliance could be a barrier. We talked a little bit about your journey earlier about, you were thinking about having a podcast and various things were happening in your life as you were moving toward actually having a podcast. Was there any other barriers, perceived or real, that you felt as far as getting visible, having your face more online, having your voice out there? Was there anything else that made you take more thought?
When I used to record my personal finance show, because that was definitely a video show, I used to be really nervous going on camera. Which is weird because it's no different than for me to sit down to do a podcast, either solo or with someone, because I know I'm on camera. That was kind of a weird mental hurdle. I was far more comfortable being a guest on people's podcasts, knowing that I was on camera versus being the host inside an actual television studio.
Like maybe the pressure of being the host, of like leading the show, maybe?
Yeah, that could have been that because that was definitely in the beginning of my journey. The other thing, so my show used to be just about general personal finance. So my guests were anyone who had anything to do with personal finance, whether it was a financial advisor, a mortgage broker, an insurance agent. And I used to have a hard time getting guests, not because I didn't know enough people, but not everybody wanted to be on the show and not everybody could make it, right? There was scheduling because we had to book studio time. Whereas today, because my podcast and my practice is so focused, I'm like bursting at the seams with people who want to be on the show. And I know a ton of people who I want on the show. And the hardest part went from how do I get guests to be on the show to how do I whittle this down? Because the list is insanely long right now. And I have more people reaching out to me frequently like, hey, I'd love to be on your show. I'm like, oh my goodness, right? Because as it stands now, even if I record something today, they're not going to be on for months and months and months because the list is so long.
Well, I think that gives us an opportunity to talk a little bit about, the frequency at which you publish and the pattern that you're doing as far as like solos versus interview episodes, and a little bit about like the criteria of who you would want on your show. And I think all of those things, plus the niche, impact this bustling list of potential guests. And so this answers the question of like, man, how am I going to get guests on my show? Because that's another barrier that some people think. And, what am I going to talk about? Which we addressed earlier. And then now this whole guesting conundrum. So will you share why you publish, when you publish, how what all the details of your show are?
Yeah. So I publish twice a month, second and fourth Thursdays. The first episode of the month is a solo episode with just me talking about some aspect of paying for college, financial aid, student loans, whatever. The second episode is a guest episode where I'm interviewing. Now, as far as determining which guest, their area of expertise has to be at least tangentially related to college or college financial aid. So whether that's admissions officers, people who are independent admissions people, student loan people, whatever, but they have to have some connection to the topic. I picked twice a month because I like that frequency for a couple of reasons. So when I did my TV show previously, that was monthly. And even then, it was hard to maintain that frequency because I was juggling my schedule, the studio schedule, and the schedule of the guests. So it was hard to maintain. But I did not want to go weekly because I know that that's hard to maintain because I have a life, right? like I do other things besides just record podcasts and videos all day. So I did not necessarily want the pressure to have to produce something weekly. I know there are podcasters who I think and I know who produce daily. Honestly, I don't know how they do it. I could not do that, at least not right now. So really twice a month was sort of a good cadence. Now, part of it also was that it gave me time to do stuff because, people generate content, right? Everybody talks about repurposing content using clips and turning podcasts into blog posts and blah, blah, blah. And I'll be honest, I'm not doing all that. I'm doing some of that work myself, not because I don't want to pay anybody. It's actually, I want to kind of learn it, kind of experience it for myself a little bit. That's one of the things I've always done is kind of done it by myself to then figure out what I really want to do versus not want to do. So the twice a month cadence gives me time in between episodes to figure that stuff out. Quite frankly. And this was not from beginning. I mean, I'm still figuring stuff out today on episode whatever we're on that I did not do for episodes 1, 2, and 3 because I didn't figure it out yet. So I find that's a good cadence. Now, what I'm thinking actually is at some point I may have to go weekly because I'm getting more guest requests. I need to find a way to fill in, to get these guests on, right? And so I know we're talking about different ideas. We'll see about that. I'm not 100% sold about it. But as far as picking the guests, so a lot of the initial guests are people I know or know directly or friends. There are a couple of criteria that we'll use. One is, aside from people I know or have met or whatever, right? Are they active on social media? Because I would want them to share my episodes, right? So if they're not really active on social media, then, if they post once a year, is that really going to reach anybody for me? Probably not. Or do they have like a big following, right? One or the other. And that is balanced by, are they a subject matter expert in their particular niche? So I will have people on who are subject matter experts in their niche, but they might not have a big social media following, or they're not that active on social media. And that'd be okay because I want them for their knowledge, right? So in an ideal world, I really want both. I will say this. I interviewed someone recently who's relatively new to podcasts. This is a episode that hasn't published yet. And he was pretty nervous. So as the host, I wanted him for his subject matter knowledge. He doesn't have a huge social media following, but I had to do a couple of extra prep meetings. In that particular case, I actually scripted out my questions a little bit more, but it's really for his benefit, not mine. But I did warn him, like, we might not go in this order, and you have to be prepared for me to ask you follow-on questions about something that, based on what your answer was to whatever. And so I spent a lot more time hand-holding that guest than probably some of the other guests who are more experienced talking on podcasts or videos. But it was a good experience for me as the host because I have to remember some of the basic things I like take for granted now that maybe the guest doesn't know, right? So it was actually a good experience for me as my sort of evolution as a host. Like, oh yeah, you know, you have to make sure of this and this and make sure that your camera's right, make sure you actually have decent lighting and, you know, and just some of the real basic stuff that I don't really think about much these days because I just do it. Again, those are the criteria, right? Like I know them, big social media following or active social media and or subject matter knowledge is really kind of how I whittle people down. And I'm gonna have to whittle people down.
Well, and I think you've done such a good job at niching and getting specific on what you like to talk about and who you want to have on, that is why you have this overflow of guests. And so if anyone is having the opposite problem, you're having trouble getting people on, that might be something that you look at is either niche that episode or niche that show so that it's easier to find, you know, hey, I want to do an episode or a season or whatever about this specific thing. And I need people who talk about this. And that's where you'll see that influx of perfectly qualified people. It's the same thing we do in our business with customers, right? Like I want customers who fit these specific criteria. And when we start speaking to that person who fits those criteria, they start to come in. So I love that advice there. Something that you mentioned, and let's just let people know a couple of dates and numbers and things like that just about your show so they're a little more informed. You have published at this point episode 14, a few more probably by the time this airs. But at the time of recording, you've published episode 14, which I'm super proud of you, Jack. That's amazing. You launched your show in February of 2025. And just in these past, not even, you don't even have 3/4 of the year that you've been publishing. And so just to give people a good idea, I hope you don't mind me sharing, you have over 600 listens on just the podcast alone. You've got 60 plus subscribers, thousands of views. I'm looking at a stat right now on your YouTube channel, 5,611 views in the last 28 days. That is impressive. And 12 new subscribers within the past 28 days. So
I would have never thought of that. Let me just interject one moment.
Yeah.
When I was doing the clips and stuff before, I was using YouTube just as a repository, a storage place for the stuff, right? I wasn't promoting, like, because, you know, like content creators promote their YouTube channel, they monetize whatever. I was not doing any of that. I'm still not doing that. But I was literally just using YouTube just as a place to store it and then sending out the links like prospects, like, oh, you had a question about this? Let me show you a video on this, right? That whatever, right? But since I've been doing more of this, it's unbelievable to me that little old me, and I say that humbly because I'm just a regular guy, that like I'm getting like thousands of views and like I'm watching the numbers go up like, oh my goodness. And hey, advisors, I am not the marketing expert, right? You should never take any marketing advice from me. Okay. Let's be clear about this. But it's just inconceivable. Like this is happening and I love it. Like I love to see it, but you know, it's helping me get my message out and stuff. But I would have never dreamt about this in like a million years.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I want to highlight your numbers just because, like you said, like you're a normal guy following a set cadence of published dates. I mean, yes, I'm behind the scenes helping you and saying, hey, I need a solo recording or I need this or, you know, hey, get me a headshot of your guest, things like that. But in general, to publish 14 episodes, plus you're promoting things on social media, which I do want to hear about, and just slow growth, right? Like you don't have thousands of subscribers, but in a let's say 8-month period to have over 60 subscribers growing from absolute scratch and doing no advertising that I know of. And just this organic, like you said, sharing of specific videos. And I think more of your shorts and like reels is what you're sharing with people to answer a question, which then a lot of those tie back to a full episode, which I think that's where the magic is. So yeah, would you share a little bit about how you're repurposing your episodes, how you're creating your reels? Because I don't think they're just chopped straight from the podcast episodes. I think you're doing some of that, but I think you're also making one-off reels or shorts about a specific topic. So could you share?
This is part of the learning. So when the podcast first launched, I was creating one reel, one short, if you will, out of the podcast episode, and I would publish it on social media. So again, an episode would publish, let's say on the second Thursday. I would get one short out of that and publish that to my social media. You know, like watching like a 30-second video, it'd be like a preview of the whole episode. So I would have some text around it. And then at the bottom, of course, link to the full episode or listen here for the full episode. And there's your link. And that was it. And I was getting decent traction. But what people tell you in the space, content creators, is that you should be, or you can repurpose one episode into like 50 different things, right? Like an email, blog posts, and this and this and this. So recently I started pulling 4 reels out of each episode. For me, it's the Thursday the episode launches is one. The following Monday, again, to promote that episode. The following Thursday, and then the following Monday again, because that'll be the 4th week. And so promoting that first episode and then that 4th week, the second episode of the month will launch. And I wasn't doing this with the early episode. Like I said, figuring stuff out. I haven't repurposed it into more stuff yet, although that is coming. But separately from that, the reason I only did that sort of frequency, so basically, 4 times, is because I have other stuff. So I share, for example, anytime I'm quoted in an article, I share the link to the article. So I got to leave some room on the calendar for that, because some people say post every day. Other people say post once. I don't know, but I don't want to post multiple things in one day because I don't want to lose myself and my own generated noise. Then I also record a separate short video, just separate from the podcast, just on some question or a recent client situation. So, and I'll record that anywhere. So recently I was on vacation. I was at the beach on Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and I decided to just have some fun with it. So I recorded it on the beach, sitting in one of those giant, like oversized Adirondack chairs, and the wind's blowing, my hair's like whipping around and stuff. And I just recorded like a short. It was wicked funny. And I had my like sandals on, and I had like a shirt on and like my swimsuit. So just recording a podcast because why not? So I will do those things, but again, it's to put information out there, right? And even though those shorts don't specifically tie to a podcast episode, they might be a little bit more timely in topic. But the idea is to drive people to see my content. Hey, this guy actually knows what he's talking about. Maybe they're seeing my other content. So of course, then I have the other posts from the podcast, right? So drive views and stuff. So again, I'm starting to figure it out, right? I do want to focus on this one thing. I think sometimes podcasters and video creators, I think we get hung up too much on like number of downloads. I would just say like, don't worry about that, right? Like it'll come. In the beginning, it's going to be low. In the beginning, it's going to be low. I mean, that's just it. But it's part of the process. And now, especially where, again, I mentioned earlier how I'm pushing everybody to my podcast, right? Prospects want to meet with me, go to the podcast. Everybody gets to go to the podcast. So I know those numbers will come up. I'm not really worried about it. I'm not doing any advertising, and I'm not selling sponsorships or ads. So that's not a compliance. Like obviously for me, for what I do, there's plenty of financial companies I probably eventually could get to sponsor that would actually make sense. And my compliance would definitely tell me no on that, I'm sure. So I'm not worried about that. The podcast is doing what I need it to do for right now, and I'm good with that.
So a few key points there. And then right here at the end, I do want to hear if there's anything else on your mind that you think would help somebody. But my 3 key points that I want to highlight off of what you just said is, we were very strategic when we were designing your show, not only around the frequency of publish and how often to have solos versus guests, but there's also a call to action in your intro and outro of every episode. So there's literally no chance that someone could listen, get this great college information, and then have no idea how to reach out to Jack. Like, that was a very intentional step that we designed. And it's a light ask. I mean, it's literally to just go connect with you on LinkedIn. Easy to do, right? Fun. No commitment required. Want to follow Jack? Want to get more information, right? So, but we were intentional about that. So if you're listening and thinking, okay, this is cool, I could do what Jack did. This seems attainable. Make sure that piece is in there. The other piece that I love that you highlighted is that you have these, what we're going to call evergreen content, meaning that someone could listen any time of year, any situation, probably a range of age of children or income or all these various factors. But that's your evergreen content, and that gets published on the podcast and on the YouTube channel. And the way that you're addressing things like Trump's bill that came out and various news on colleges and federal aid changes and things like that is through your face-to-camera shorts that are on the fly. Maybe you're in front of your green screen, maybe you're not, maybe you're out at the beach, or maybe, could be anywhere. But that's how you are not only creating trust with people because they're seeing where you are, what you're doing, that you're not in this stuffy professional setting all the time. And you're also addressing a current issue or event that they're probably reading headlines about or getting emails, from CNN or whatever in their inbox. So that humanizing trust is being created. The timeliness of your episodes or of your content, you're addressing both sides of that, with it being a current event and some evergreen content. And then the call to action. I think all 3 of those are really important to highlight. And before we go, I want to hear if there's anything else that you think would be really, really helpful for someone listening.
And thank you for all that. But I want to go back to sort of something I mentioned earlier, which is, I think sometimes when people think about this, they feel like that they have to get everything perfect. It has to be really polished, make sure the tie's straight or whatever, or the makeup's perfect for your female audience. But again, the podcast is an opportunity to showcase your personality. It's okay if it's not perfect for human beings. I mean, some of those shorts I did on the beach, my hair is it was anything but perfect. I mean, hair's flying around everywhere and stuff. And I mean, it was awesome being on the beach, don't get me wrong. But it was not the picture perfect podcast or video episode that you might associate. So I think sometimes, especially advisors, get too hung up on that. And I would just say, just kind of let that, yeah, you might look goofy. I mean, I definitely look goofy. But at the end of the day, people need to get to know you to hire you. It's not because you have some crazy investment strategy. They still need to know and like you and trust you. And this is one of the best ways to do it. So talk to your compliance people, start educating them, and just do it. You should do it.
Yeah. Thank you, Jack. I love that. And I love that podcasting provides that space where I hope that's what we can do, is kind of set aside the stuffy professional for just a minute and show people the human side of you and educate them at the same time. So before you go, where should people find and follow you and listen to your show?
Yeah, so my podcast is called Smart College Buyer. It is available on all the major platforms, Spotify, Podbean, iHeart, YouTube, Amazon Music. I can't even remember. I know you handled the stuff for me, so I probably don't. Yeah, there's a lot of, so all the major platforms where you might listen to a podcast, I'm on. So Smart College Buyer, or connect with me on LinkedIn. Again, that's my call to action, as you mentioned, for right now. So Jack Wang, LinkedIn, Smart College Buyer, you'll see my picture and all sorts of college stuff. So it's not hard to figure out which one I am on that. So connect with me. Always love to talk to advisors. And if I can share some advice or helpful tips, I always do it. Just understand that you don't have to be perfect. I'm still figuring it out, and you can too.
Yeah. And I think you're having fun along the way, shall we say?
Absolutely. And I know, sorry, really quick story. So at the last FinCon, right, you and I, so the quick story is I harassed Virginia endlessly because I just end up recording all these episodes I didn't have planned in advance, but it was serendipity. It was like people were available. Let's grab them. Let's start recording, right? So she's trying to be off doing other things and talking to other people. I'm like, Virginia, I need you. So I go from that conference. So there was a financial aid conference about a month afterwards. So I went to that. And so whereas at FinCon, everybody and their dog is recording something. Like you can't turn around without seeing somebody recording something. So we have to always be aware of like not walking through a camera shot. At this other conference, it was the exact opposite. Like I could not get people to record with me. I'm like begging and pleading, like good people I know with good knowledge. I'm like trying to get them recorded with me. And of course, I got some people recorded with me. And then the other attendees, because they're not used to it, they're walking through the camera shot. Right? It was like complete night and day going from an environment where everybody's recording to nobody recording and nobody wants to. It was so weird.
Well, and that's that immersion factor, right? Like we feel like it's normal to just like set up with a microphone and a camera because we're like immersed in this world. And when we go to FinCon, that is who it's for. It's for financial content creators. So everyone there, and service providers, of course, also a finance nerd. So I totally still belong. That's what we're doing. And we may not even be focused on recording everything there. I know that was one of your primary objectives last year, and we're going to do it again this year. So I'm really excited. But yeah, going to a different conference, then you're almost the weirdo that has the podcast, right?
Oh, 100%.
Because then you're not in that immersed environment where it's normalized. Then they're thinking like, oh, wow, look at that guy. Like he's got a podcast. Like he's recording over there. It's so odd, And then we're talking about you.
Yeah. Oh, I was 100% the weirdo, right? Because, they're taking pictures of the sessions and the speakers and people recording short videos of like a speaker talking. Yeah, okay, that's what you do at like every conference. But then I'm asking people like, hey, can I set up in a corner and I want to interview people? And they're like, what? Like, you want to do what?
Yeah. Here? Where?
Yeah, what? Like, it was so foreign to them. So that conference is coming up again for me this year. I'm going to go again this year. I think now that I've done it once and people have seen it, it's probably not going to be quite as bad. I'll still be the weirdo because I'll be the one guy recording. Like, I'm not anticipating this huge wave of recording now. But at least they'll know, like, all right, the guys recording, don't walk through the camera shot.
Hopefully. But I'll share also that, real estate conferences, financial conferences, almost any other place besides FinCon, I would say, and probably besides like if you went to, I think there's VidCon and VidFest and like other creator focused conferences. So outside of those, that's how it is. I am constantly positioning myself in a weird way to like basically block people from walking in front of the camera while my people are recording. And typically I'm wearing like a hot pink or yellow jacket or something that's like really obvious, like, and I'm steering people and they're like, oh, and they're trying to go around. But nonetheless, in the background of the video, you can hear them like, oh, we almost ran into the camera. Did you see that? And they're like laughing and stuff. I'm like, oh my God, people, it's so funny. So yeah. Always fun to be the recording person, whether it's video or audio, at a conference. But I love that you do that and that you kind of, it's almost like you're bringing awareness to the space.
Right. And I would say for advisors too, and again, you may need to run this through compliance, but if you ever go to a conference, XYPN or Future Proof or any other like Morningstar investment conference or something like that, right? Yeah, you might not record the session, but even if you record it yourself, like, hey, I'm at blah, 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 and I'm about to go sit in a conference, talk about this so I can know even more to better serve you, kind of just informally, again, that shows your personality too, right? Like, and that you're doing something and not just sitting behind a computer screen. I think even something simple like that, I personally, I think it would be kind of worthwhile too for the advisor audience listening, because you don't see it, right? It's so rare from advisors. You don't see it. So that would make you stand out, because now, if you're at a conference, you're going to a session, you're furthering your education to better help the client. That immediately is going to help you stand out versus the advisor who doesn't attend any conferences.
Or who does attend them, but doesn't say anything about it.
Right.
And never mentions that they were there and never posts a video or does anything. Immediately that video is going to stand out, even if you aren't like a formal podcaster or you don't have a YouTube channel or something. But I think that's
probably just don't record at the bar after the conference day is over. That's probably the only thing you probably shouldn't do. Like, hey, clients, look at this.
Yeah. Keep your wine out of the picture there, please. Yeah.
Other than that, it's probably okay.
I think that's great advice, though. It's just like a baby step into the content creation world. It's going to feel weird at first. It's going to feel weird. Like the first reels and shorts I ever made, I felt so weird. And trust me, they look weird. And I was weird. I still am weird. But, it's going to feel awkward. But I think the more you do it, you get used to it, but you also get better at it. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you so much for having me on, Virginia. I really appreciate this. Awesome to talk. Always awesome to talk to you. Love seeing you in person when I have the opportunity. But I think that, for your audience, right, for advisors listening, I hope that I'm able to share some of these lessons I'm learning, right? And they're going to go on their own journey too, right? Like they have to figure some of this stuff out, but the bottom line is it's definitely worth doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I don't think either of us would be here if we didn't believe it was worth our time and energy.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you.